Design. So we'll go to the next slide, Mike. Thank you. So I'm Caroline Gomez-Tom, and I'm the Enrollment Network and Accessibility Manager for Covering Wisconsin. And I am with,
Sorry.
yeah,
My name is Mike Moriarty. I'm the design and media specialist with Covering Wisconsin.
and we'll tell you a little bit about Covering Wisconsin just so that you have some background and why we're presenting to you today. Because I think this is what some of our more unique um, areas of support for our partners that maybe more people don't know about. So, Covering Wisconsin is a program through UW Extension that helps people find and use health insurance. We currently have the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services grant or funding for our Navigator program, which helps people sign up for Medicaid and the health insurance marketplace, which means we have people on the ground across the state that are able to help people sign up for coverage. And then we also provide education, outreach, and promotion around health insurance access and coverage and access to health care. And our team, including Mike on the call today, helps create consumer tested materials and offers trainings like to professionals like you all around health insurance topics. So we'll go to the next slide. And right now, if you are not aware, but are open to knowing, it is open enrollment right now. So right now, our navigators are hustling, uh, day long, full of appointments, helping people renew their health insurance through healthcare.gov or helping them get connected to some other form of coverage depending on each individual's financial and household needs. And so right now, the reason that it's especially busy this week is that December 15th is the deadline for January 1st coverage, but open enrollment goes through November 1st through January 15th. And so we'll have a slide at the end, I believe, where you can get connected to more information about our Navigator program, or if you need to refer people to our navigators. But this is a great resource statewide, um, free local assistance to help people sign up for insurance. And then just to say a little more about the work that I do before diving into our universal design presentation, I'm the Enrollment Network and Accessibility Manager, which means I keep our partners up to date around policy changes. And then we also bring trends that we're seeing in our communities to partners like the Department of Health and Health Services, some of our national partners, to make sure that these policies are working for our communities. And the enrollment network model is the way that we administer this information. So we have someone representing each region as the enrollment network lead, and we host regular meetings where we can share information on a either monthly or bi-monthly basis. And it's open to anyone who is interested in healthcare, health coverage, health access. So we keep local partners informed about policy changes. We build enrollment assister support and capacity. So if we see that there's a need for more enrollment assisters in a certain area of the state, we bring them together. We organize and streamline local outreach efforts. We create regionally and culturally relevant messaging and promotion, which you'll see some of our resources on our website. And then, of course, it's that connection to sharing ideas, trends, thoughts between key stakeholders in this work. And here you'll see all of our enrollment network leads. We have 10 enrollment networks. 8 of them are regional, and then 2 are affinity specific, so community specific. We have a Hmong enrollment network and a Latine enrollment network. And so if this is something that you're interested, please feel free to reach out to me either after this meeting or later on. And then I think with that, I pass it over to Mike to get into universal design.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Caroline. So yeah, I will go ahead and take the reins here. Just to give you a little bit about my background, I am a graphic designer, as I stated in the beginning. I got my degree from the University of Dubuque in Dubuque, Iowa, and then came to Madison and met covering Wisconsin and have been there ever since. So I've been in my role for almost 8 years now. And my role has changed pretty drastically as covering Wisconsin's expanded. Started out pretty much just doing our how-to sheets, which if none of you are familiar, if you go to Covering Wisconsin's website, we have a health insurance library with, I believe, over 30 instructional sheets around health insurance, and those are both in English and Spanish. So that's primarily what we worked on in the beginning, and then it slowly has shifted to be a combination of that and marketing as our funds have grown and as Covering Wisconsin has expanded. So I guess going from there then, what is universal design? Why is it important? And how can you utilize it? Now, the biggest thing I would like all of you to take away from this is that universal design is not there's no solid rules here. These are all guidelines. So I don't want anyone thinking these are hard and fast, I have to do this or it's not a good design. Design, first and foremost, as many of you are probably aware, is there are personal preferences, which is fine and which make for the world that we live in, which is great. But these are just kind of guidelines to follow to ensure that your designs are more user-friendly, are more design compatible, and will make the design overall better. Excuse me, universal design is the process of taking complex information and making it much more accessible for everyone to use. That includes, consumers, that includes partners. Everyone can benefit from this information. It doesn't matter if you are a professional, heading a college. No one wants to just read a block of text all day. If there's some way that you can go ahead and separate that out and make it easier to read, by all means, go ahead and do that. As you see on the graphic on the right, why read that entire block of text? Because all you're going to hear is wah, wah, wah. So, continuing along here. So these principles can include font and color choice, using visuals to help direct your information and guide what you want them to see first, page organization, and there'll be a little bit more, quite a bit more that I talk about here. But why is it important? As I just described, everybody wants to be able to understand information easier. No one wants to go through and read a thesis paper that's 20 pages long and it's all single space text. And anything you can do to improve that understanding or that design will help with your understanding, help with results and what you're trying to achieve, and just overall make it a lot easier for your audience. So where do we start? So because we are talking about crafting material specifically for social media, one of the very, very first things that you need to do is figure out who's your audience. Not only that, you need to figure out what do you want them to know. So really just sitting down and thinking, okay, who am I trying to reach the most? Where are they at? What are their ages? Depending on the social media content, if it's going to be something like a video or if it's just going to be a static graphic. There's a lot of things you need to consider, and really just sitting down and kind of figuring out who that audience is your very first step and making sure that you reach that audience correctly. Because if you don't have that goal in mind, putting anything onto the internet is just putting it out into the ether and it'll get lost. So that pre-planning, even if it's just for 5 minutes, can really help guide your designs and your expectations later on. So looking at some examples, I would say that this is a really important step, not to copy what anyone else is doing, but to really get an idea on what do you like? Do you like certain graphics more? Do you like the way that somebody did a certain post over someone else? What about the way that they're transcribing their text? There's a lot of things that you can pull just by looking at other people's posts and figuring out what do you like, what do you want to emulate. Emulation is not copying. So, don't worry, as long as you're not copying verbatim, you're fine. So in terms of content, especially when it comes to social media, less is always more. Again, no one likes reading a 20-page essay. No one really likes reading a 20-page essay when you're on social media. So avoiding things like blocks of text, And, again, asking yourself, why is this important? What do I want my audience to take away from? What I want them to do with the information? Do I want them to click on something? Do I want them to visit a website? Do I just simply want them to walk away with a piece of information? With covering Wisconsin, the last couple of years during open enrollment, we've been pushing to a partner website called Wiscovered. So we've actually been pushing a little bit away from our website, which seems a little oppositional to what we're trying to achieve. But with that, it has us combining that effort with our partners gives a centralized location for consumers to go to. It becomes a trusted source within the community. And, us putting the message out there does get our name out there, but it also does help consistently grow that audience and make them aware of what we're trying to do and what we want them to do. And then also, how can I make this clear? So let's say you do draft up a post, read through it 3 or 4 times. Is there anything that you can cut, anything that you can maybe move to the post text instead of having it on the actual image? Is there anything that can be simplified? Us being in our professional fields, it's very easy to assume that other people know what we're talking about. So jargon. So it's one of those things, really read through, okay, is there a piece of jargon that I am including here that maybe I can pull away from? Or maybe I can explain it in simpler terms. And then also, can you just reduce the words to, or reduce the amount of words to make the important information pop that much more? Now, this is more so when you're actually designing your material. So this is a little less in the text front and more into the actual design finally. But what is white space? So I'm sure all of you have heard this term before, but white space is basically a design technique to intentionally direct attention to a specific part of the page or specific piece of information that you want them to see. As you can see in the example on the right, these are two pieces of Covering Wisconsin's how-to sheets that I was talking about earlier. So the one on the left is one of our original designs. I believe 2017 is when we came up with that sheet. And I mean, I still argue it's better than a full sheet of text with no graphics or anything, but it's a little busy, I'm not going to lie. And so what I did is a couple of years ago, went back, re-examined the information and just looked at, okay, how can I separate this information out in a way that will make it easier for our consumers to understand and make it so it's not as heavy when you first look at it. I don't know if anyone can give me any examples of maybe what I did to help create some of that spacing. I don't know if we can open it up to the audience real quick.
Don't be shy. We're learning together.
Yeah, and there's no bad answers. Like I said, every this is all guideline. This is not hard and fast rules. So anyone have any ideas on kind of what I played around with to try and achieve the effect on the right?
You kind of played around with not having borders around the text box or shaded borders around the text boxes or boxes filled in to
Yep,
minimize that.
exactly. Yep, I expanded out the information, tried not to keep it so blocked in, tried to let it breathe a little bit more. Anyone else?
Someone put in the chat phone number once instead of twice.
Oh, yes. So instead of putting information in multiple spots, I mean, especially, we had it in that red spot before because we really wanted people to go to that information. But with the way the new information is laid out, your eye naturally flows down the page a little bit easier. So there's not really a point in duplicating that information if the eye goes down the page and naturally comes to where you want it to anyway. Now, that being said, again, this is one of those guidelines, not hard and fast rules, but because typically consumers will, especially if it's a multi-page document, including information in different spots can actually be helpful because people may forget if they're reading on the first page and they get to the last page, they may forget that phone number. So it is, helpful to include that. But since this was a single page document, there really wasn't a point. It was just duplication of information for duplication's sake. So it helped freed up space and helped make the entire document cleaner. So yeah, both of those were really good points. So I'm going to go ahead and move on here. But yeah, just as I've been saying, it helps improve readability and understanding, helps lay out your information better, and it just makes it feel more approachable. It doesn't make it feel as busy when you first come into it. So this does kind of roll into what we call hierarchy. So hierarchy is the importance of the information laid out on the page. What do you want them to know first? And how can you organize it in a way that helps the eye flow from that important information down either to lesser important information or just to help it flow through the page? So using larger text for headers can help bring your eye immediately to the top of that page and help it naturally flow down more. Bolding is another one that can really help direct the eye. So if you have a block of text and you want just a specific sentence or a specific piece of information, just bolding that out and maybe changing the color a little bit can help really pop that piece of information. Bullets are another great way to really separate out what would be a long block of paragraph into more manageable bits of information. So instead of having an entire paragraph, maybe try pull out 2 or 3 key points that you want them to know and pull that into a bullet point. So it'll help direct the eye and it'll help your understanding of your audience. And try and indent those bullets as well. That does also help direct the eye. As you notice, I've indented it here on this page. So there's that little bit of white space right between the bullet and then the paragraph, and that helps direct your eye just right down to the left in the diagonal to move them down. And then, as I said before, color can also add hierarchy by making your eye go to that specific piece of information, even more so than maybe just bolding will. So I have an example here of hierarchy. And so as I've been, repeating on the left, we have that block of text. And then we've separated it out and tried to make it a lot more readable. As you can see, making, this is an example of using hierarchy, having that be your header. Really, this is what you want you to know right away. Going down, this is our second bit. Here's some bullets. And then finally separating all of that from maybe there's a new piece of information that I want you to read. So I separate that even further to add that white space, add that hierarchy, add that layout, and make the entire thing just so much easier to read. Now, when it comes to fonts, social media can be a little picky because obviously you don't always have your choice of fonts. But if you're designing something on Canva, you will have a choice of what fonts you want to use. So if you're designing for what we call a low literacy audience, an audience that has low literacy rates and maybe doesn't have a high school education or maybe even less, using specific fonts can actually help improve your readability and your understanding of your content. These are called serif versus sans serif fonts. And I'm sure all of you are probably more familiar with this than you think, but serif have essentially a feat or a graphic or something attached to the font that makes it stand out. Something and it can add visual improvements to your material, but it also can make it harder to read. So whenever you're doing paragraph text or anything where you want somebody to pull information away from, it's generally best to use a sans serif font as it helps the eye follow along the information better. Those feet on the serif fonts, as minuscule as they may seem, when you put that into a whole block of text, it can actually interrupt your reading ability, even just by the slightest bit, which can interrupt, your comprehension of the materials. So as considering your fonts, is my font easy to read? Am I using a serif versus sans serif? Another important thing, am I writing multiple sentences with this font? Like I said, if it's going to be a paragraph of text, a sans serif is probably the best way to go. If it's going to be just something like a header, you can get away with a serif or a more decorative font because it's usually only going to be a couple of words that somebody needs to read. It can add some visual decoration to your design, but you don't want the entire thing to be just in that font. And another thing that's important is my font too small? Especially with social media, generally the rule is you want the font to at least be a 16-point font. And that's really about as low as you want to go. Visually impaired readers will have a very hard time reading anything under a 16-point font on a screen. As I'm sure most of you are aware, computer screen fatigue is a very real thing. So if you're staring at a screen all day and, all of a sudden you go to a page and somebody advertises something and it's a 6-point font and you're sitting there having to squint or use the magnifying glass, you're not going to be happy. You're not going to probably pull away pull away the information they want you to pull away with. So it's just best to really kind of keep in mind, how big is the font that I'm using? And a good method to kind of judge is the material readable is step away from your computer about 5 or 10 feet if you can. Look at that screen from that distance. If it's still readable to you, it'll probably be readable to somebody on their phone or at a desktop. But without that, it can make it much more difficult to understand your information. And then in terms of color, another very, very big important thing. Color can include not just the text, but also your graphics, your background. Obviously, if it is going to be your text, you want to be very, very conscientious of what color text you are going to put on the page. As you can see on the example on the right, the top section and the bottom section are very, very hard to read because you're putting a light colored background and a white colored font, or a light colored font on a white background. And vice versa, you're doing a dark text on a dark background. Generally, when you want to do this type of thing, you want to keep it very sparingly. If you're going to have graphics that you want to have like a white text on or something like that, you generally want just to mainly be the header. If you're going to have blocks of text, you really want that to be a darker text on a lighter background, really make that stand out. High contrasting colors, avoiding light on light, avoiding dark on dark. And then, as I just said, keep your white text to a minimum. And as I said before, take a step back. And if you're having trouble reading it from a distance, your audience will definitely have a hard time reading it. Accessibility is a very big thing in design, and visual impairment, especially when it comes to computers, is a very, very big thing that we want to be aware of when we're designing. And then we go on to visuals. So visuals can actually, real quick, sorry, I do want to make one more comment about color. When you are using color, be aware of what colors you're using. They can come with emotional connection that you may not be aware of, but that your audience may resonate with in a different way. So with Covering Wisconsin, because we're in the health insurance industry, we typically try to avoid a lot of what we call harsh colors. So like dark reds, if you're associating or if you're with Covering Wisconsin, since we're with health insurance, red with the health industry generally is associated with blood. So we try and avoid that. And again, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's just something to be conscious of. If you have a certain audience, certain ethnic groups may respond differently to different colors. I believe it was our Hmong audience doesn't respond as well to certain colors as they do others, just because of the social and historical background there. And so just a little bit of research to figure out, okay, what are some common colors that our Hmong audience would respond well to can go a long way in reaching that audience even further. And finally, this adding visuals can really help as well. So let's say that you have your graphic, you have your text, you have everything set up, and you're like, okay, well, maybe I'm good to go. Maybe I'll post it to social media just like this. Well, maybe pause just a second. Are there any images that I can include with that message that'll help reinforce it, even in the slightest, most subtle way? I don't know if any of you remember the sheets that I showed earlier, but just small icons along with the text can help non-native English speakers understand your material better. It can help direct the eye better to where you want your audience to read. And just, it makes it look prettier too, if I'm being honest. And then pictures of people help engage your feelings. So what I mean by that is that your audience will respond better when they see themselves in your image. So if you're going to be posting something of a doctor's office and you want a patient image, and you're reaching primarily a Hispanic audience, putting a picture of a white guy in Madison, maybe not the best option there. And trying to think, are they going to see themselves and their family or their group or their friends in this image? Again, with covering Wisconsin, we try and reach a very, very large swath of the state. And with that comes, different groups. So our advertising in Milwaukee is very different than our advertising in, rural Superior. So it's being conscious of what images I'm using and how that will reflect with the audience at hand.
Can I add something, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the reasons why our enrollment networks are in existence is the local community knows its community best. So asking partners, if they relay, if they feel connected to the resource or the materials that we put together as a way to test them, also going out into the community and testing materials, it doesn't have to be in its final form for you to ask, hey, what does this document show you or tell you? That can be really it could be helpful in finding like what you want your final version to look like. Um, and and then there was one more piece that I was going to say. Could you go back to the previous slide, Mike? Because maybe I'll
Yeah,
remember what I
absolutely.
was going to say. Um, no, I lost it. But engaging your community is going to be really important to understanding uh, really what are the versions of your document that will relate to them the best. Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, thank you, Caroline. And I do want to add on to that covering Wisconsin, especially for our instructional sheets, we do a lot of consumer testing with the audience that we're trying to reach. So if it is something that you want the community to really grasp onto, if it's something that you have a little bit of time and you can consumer test with, even a couple of people can go a very, very long way. I can't tell you about the number of materials that we've had where me and my boss Stephanie have been sitting there and we're like, yep, it looks good. It's good to go. And then we go and we consumer test it. And I distinctly remember there was an audience at a homeless shelter we tested at Appleton. And I thought the document, I really didn't think the document could have that many changes. And we get in there and they ripped it to shreds. It was very, very humbling as a designer sitting there. And they're like, yeah, I don't understand this. Their eye was going completely where I didn't want it to go. And it was very, very humbling, as I said, to sit there and watch them, what I thought was this very well-designed document. They just couldn't understand it whatsoever. And it's really, really important that we had tested that with them because if we had just released it as is, it would have gotten into the community and they would have had no idea what to do with it. I mean, they wouldn't have resonated, they wouldn't have understood it. And so having that consumer testing, even when you think it is good to go, really can make a very, very massive difference. And so really the last thing I have here, and this is a little bit more advanced, so I don't blame you if it kind of slips away after everything here, but this is called rule of thirds. So if any of you have done photography, you're probably a little familiar with this, but the rule of thirds is separating out your image into 9 different portions and then trying to organize your information in a way where it hits the highlight points where those dividing lines converge. So as you see on the graphic there, those 4 points in the middle, those are typically where you want to put your most important pieces of information. That's naturally just over the years having been tested by groups and everything else is a very tried and true compositional technique. But generally, as it says in the graphic, about 41% of the time your eye will go up to that upper left. And so generally putting information up in that upper left is generally where you'll have your audience understand the information best and where their eye will go to first. So using this can help give more direction to your image, as well as just, again, make it more solid from a design foundational perspective. So we have one final example here before we go on and move on to the activity. So I have put together a little graphic here, Happy Holidays from Covering Wisconsin. Um, Probably something most of you would be very familiar seeing from either on Facebook, from a partner or whatever. I would be curious how many of you can immediately read what all that says. Obviously, if you give it a second, definitely no problem, but probably a little bit more difficult since it's all in that script font. All the fonts the exact same size. The spacing is the exact same. Now we go ahead and we introduce some of the principles I've talked about today. So we have that hierarchy. So we increase the header size. The very first thing you see is Happy Holidays. Then I go ahead and I take out the information that I want them to know out of that script font and bring that into a sans serif. So that check out our new content coming 2025. Um, Again, that makes it so much easier to read. I've reduced the spacing between there, separated it out from the header a little bit to give that breathing space, and then bolded the coming 2025 and increased the font size a little bit to really make sure that that is the information that you're pulling from. And then because it's not as important and because it's more of just a visual nicety, having the Covering Wisconsin in the same script font as the header, just to give that connection point and to kind of round out the graphic. Again, the background's the exact same. The only thing I changed was the font. So you can see how important a little bit of design, and this is, I mean, very minimal, obviously, but just that little bit of design tweaking can go a very, very long way. All right, so now I'm going to hand things back to Caroline and let her take over. I will be here as guidance if needed, but we are going to design something together.
Yeah, so Mike, thank you, will be our coach in this experience. And I, not a formally trained graphic designer, will help put something together for us. And so one thing that I think can be overwhelming is, there's obviously like Illustrator and like other programs that are out there that people can create really nice, beautiful design. I know Mike uses Illustrator and other uh, programs. But for someone who just, we may be short-staffed or we may, just need to get information out there. What are we supposed to do if we don't have that background? And one of the tools that is available that I actually really do like is a website called Canva. And Canva is free to use. You can make basic designs with their free program or fairly low cost if you do need to invest in some of their more expansive tools. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use Canva to create a post for social media regarding this information. So audience is pregnant people. Message is, are you pregnant? Learn about free or low cost health benefits to pay for, and then the services that we want to highlight: doctor visits, birth of baby, prenatal vitamins, dental care, and more. And then where do we want them to go? We want them to go to wiscover.com. So let me see if I can share my screen really quick, and then I will show Canva. And I'm going to also pull our information a little more. See if I can do this in a way that. All right. So here we are on Canva. And like I said, this is just I have a a paid account, but right now I'm just using their free account so that you can see really bare bones what you get. One thing that I do like is it tells you like what do you want to create for. So in this case, we're going to use an Instagram post square because that can also fit both on Instagram and Facebook. And then when you click on what you're trying to create, you have these different elements. So design elements, as Mike mentioned, you do not have to recreate the wheel. You can emulate. And so one thing that I like about Canva is it gives you a lot of different options of designs that you can play around with. Not all of them are, universally designed, I will say. So you may need to take what you learned from Mike and some of their examples and make the best version for yourself. They also have styles. So if you're just like, I don't know what color palette I want to use, you can do something like that where maybe we want to use this color palette. Um, Maybe I don't want the purple and I want to, oh, where did I go with that? And it's also, once again, learning as you go, because this is it's a nice, um, system to use, but you also have to learn a little bit as you're exploring the the tools that are at your fingertips. But what I do like is that it is fairly straightforward. So now we can add, so okay, we went into design, we went uh, in the templates and styles, elements. So this is where we can add maybe um, a picture of someone who's pregnant. So one thing I also like is you can type in kind of what you're looking for, and we are going to find one that is free because we are in the free version, but maybe something cute like this. And of course, you want to do it so it resonates with your community. I'm also constrained by what's free, what free options we have. But I kind of like this. It's going with the pink vibe. Um, and then the next area is text. So I'm going to add a heading because we learned about the hierarchy.
And I
What do
will
you
say
guys?
that is a very nice thing about Canva is that it automatically will give heading, subheading, and body text sizes so that way you don't have to remember, okay, I want my heading to be a certain font size. It'll just automatically do that, which is really, really nice.
Another thing that I do like is it also has um, autocorrect, or it tells you when you spell something wrong. Some programs don't do that. And I'm like, no, doesn't every program have a spell check? All right. So then we're gonna do a subheader. Oh no. Okay, sorry. I accidentally locked my screen. Hopefully I didn't lose anybody. Learn learn about free or low cost health benefits to pay for. I'm going to tell you, it's a lot of pressure to do this in front of you all. You guys can cheer me on if you'd like, um, or
Oh, you're
tell
doing great,
me.
Caroline.
I'm messing around. I think I'm also going to keep the subheader for our bulleted list. Oh, maybe. Let me see.
And while you're doing that, Caroline, I do want to just add, it was one thing I touched on shortly earlier, but if you have a lot of text that you want your audience to know, keeping some of the more bulleted lists into your post can be a good thing, and then keeping the majority of your paragraph text in the actual post text. So, like if, for example, if you were to go into Facebook, keep the majority of the text in Facebook's default posting area. And then in terms of the graphic, that'll allow you a little bit more freedom and a little bit more breathing room to be able to put the more important information, such as, what Caroline's putting here, and even just learn about free or low cost health benefits to pay for. And so if you're realizing you have too much text for your graphic, separating it out can be a great way of including that information without necessarily needing to include it in the visual.
Oh, see, and then I don't want that, so I'm gonna. mm, that's big, too big. Eh, there we go. Trash. And then, oh, sometimes you have to click out of something to be able to move it. Wiscovered.com. I might also like play around with the color of the text because the black is very dark, but we also know that the light color of the pink, we would want something that would still stand out. Like we wouldn't put red on pink or um, I don't know, yellow on pink. Oh gosh, no. So, but maybe a dark gray we could get away with. Um, Additionally, this is all the same font, so maybe I would want to, play around with font a little bit just because we're not putting a whole lot of information. Um, and we can,
And I will see the
oh, go
nice
ahead.
thing about Canva is that it does pull the photo or the graphic color palette. So as on the left there, when the text is dropped, you can actually see that there are color swatches from the graphic that you can use, which helps color coordinate
Match.
your graphic as
Hmm.
well.
Definitely. And I love that feature. Um, the reason I got to know Canva pretty well, um, I am a county board supervisor in Milwaukee County, and I did my own graphics during my campaign. So I got to play around with Canva quite a bit. And it was nice because you can set your brand. So including your logo and like the colors that maybe your communications or graphic design department prefer or that you've built in as your design for your organization and just use those colors when you're creating materials because then it really amplifies that, oh, this document or this post or whatever is coming from you. Mike has built our brand at Covering Wisconsin and it's awesome. Like we know what colors we're supposed to use during our presentations. We know what text and font size we're supposed to use and font style. And it really helps because for someone who isn't a graphic designer, I'm like, okay, I know I can use these three things. And it helps you keep framed. And then you're just worried about the content. So what do you guys think? What do you think of my design for you all today? Would you change anything, Mike?
I might try change just a few small things,
Yeah,
as
let's
you would
let's
allude to.
tweak it.
Yeah. So the header there, as you'd said, I probably would go ahead and make that a little bit more of a stylish font. Um,
Okay. Any
so in terms
suggestions?
of, let's see. I mean,
We got a
because of the
lot.
material, you're trying to reach pregnant people. So generally with babies, it's a little bit more of like a softer. You want something that isn't so hard. So I'd probably that Fredoka maybe. I think that's
Ridoka.
what that says. Speaking
Let's
of very
see.
small
Where?
font,
Yeah,
having a
where
hard
did
time
you?
reading some of the names there.
Oh, this one?
I think
Yep.
maybe, yeah. So that one's not too bad. That one gives a little bit of text variation, so that way it's not all the same thing. In terms of color, you could try and change the header to maybe that darker, color in the, yep, that one right there, and see what it looks like. So yeah, that one's not too bad. One thing you could also do is you could probably increase it just a little bit more. And so if you get a general color range that you like, you can always go up into the color font too, and then you can manually adjust it from there. So um, color swatches can be a great way of getting into the ballpark if it's not quite what you're looking for. And then you can go from there. The only other thing that I would do is probably move up the doctor visits, birth of baby, all that information up to just underneath the colon, to really give that directionality to the text. So that way you're kind of separating that down a little bit and then maybe increasing the graphic size just a little bit more. And then I think you got yourself a pretty decent post.
We also have a comment in the chat that the background shade could be just could be slightly different because the graphic is kind of blending in where like was a suggestion from the chat.
That's a great suggestion. And there is, let me see if I can do this. Because there is a little adjustment. I don't know if it lets you do it with the free setting, but you can actually lighten the color that you're working with. Like you might know the term, Mike, but it's like to make it less opaque. Like you can kind of
Someone
adjust.
actually just mentioned it in the comments. The transparency settings actually might be
Yeah.
possible. I'm not super familiar with Canvas, so I don't know exactly where that would be.
No, and
I do want to say that if anyone is feeling super ambitious, you do have
there we go.
access to the full Adobe suite, being with
Oh,
the UW system. But that is, and there are classes that you can learn. I believe we do have access to lynda.com if that is still a thing. Um, so if you want to
mm-hmm.
learn Illustrator, feel free. But yeah, I think Canva is definitely the best way to go if you're learning and need to make something quick because a lot of the great tools here can, as Caroline has presented, really make things nice and streamlined.
I don't know where the transparency button is for the background. And so I wonder if it is not a current feature.
I think if you click the photo and if you go to the top, do you see that gradient?
Yes.
I think that's
Oh,
it.
well, that makes her lighten, but I was trying to get the background color to lighten, and that's where it's not letting me do that. Yeah, see background color. I wonder if maybe even just using the lighter version of the pink.
And you could always do it manually too. I believe going into the document color there with the color wheel, that should allow you to pick the color manually if you want. So you could just slide it a little bit over to the left there. Yep.
All right. Well, that is what we have for you today. If there's any other questions, Mike and I can be here to answer them, but I hope this was helpful.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Thank you so much, Mike. We appreciate all that you've showed us today. I think overall, local tribal health departments find this helpful, right? Because we go into our jobs and we don't necessarily get social media training or plain language training or graphic design training. So this is super helpful. And for everyone in the room here, yes, as Caroline said, thank you so much for being here. Just a few housekeeping things from us. I'm going to put in the chat, this is our evaluation survey, so different than the demographics survey, but this is just so you can let us know how the session went and what was useful to you, and we take all that information and apply it to future office hours. So if you have no questions or if you have no comments, you are free to go. Thank you for being here. We hope this was helpful. And of course, as Caroline said, and as we usually do for our office hours, we will stay on until 10, even after if you need it, but to really talk through any kind of support or any kind of assistance you need with your youth outreach, your youth engagement, and your social media strategies and outreach as well. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for being here, and we'll stay on for any comments.